Welcome to Policy Implications. In this podcast, we dive into new research in economics and finance and ask what it means for policymakers in the real world. This season, we focus on Ukraine, the war, the economy, and the institutions that will shape the country's future. I'm your host, Olha Zadorozhna, an economist working on Ukraine and Ukrainian myself. This series is supported by the Economists for Ukraine Network and Kozminski University. Today we're talking about Ukrainian science. What has happened to research and universities during the war, what has changed since 2014 and 2022, and how Ukrainian researchers can still publish and be heard internationally. My guest today is Sasha Talavera, professor of economics at the University of Birmingham, a co-author of mine on the paper Research Productivity During the Russian War in Ukraine that we are going to discuss today, and an editor of the journal Economic Modeling. Both Sasha and I are Ukrainians living abroad and working in Akademia, so it's fair to say that the topic we are going to discuss is very personal for both of us. Sasha, welcome to Policy Implications.
Hi, Olga. Thanks for having me here.
When most people think about the war in Ukraine, they think about the frontline, weapons, refugees, reconstruction, and very few think about researchers. The people teaching students, supervising PhD theses, running labs, writing papers in the middle of the war. But as we show in our paper, war really does affect research productivity, and in the long run, that shapes a country's ability to innovate and grow. So why is it important, in your view, to talk about Ukrainian research during wartime? Why should people who care about Ukraine's future also care about the state of its science?
Well, Olga, that's a very good point. On the one hand, like when we have huge deficit of different resources, when country is at war, questions like science might not be very important. However, we can go back to the roots of economic development generally. And if you believe basic, even macroeconomic models like so, then technology is main driver of technological growth, of economic growth. And obviously, let's say, to develop technology, one needs science. There are other points that I would like to mention. One of them is science can be indicator of state capacity to be able to make policy decision, to provide innovation, to boost productivity, also as an indicator of human capital as well. We also have to think about science as an element of international visibility. If a certain country has researchers that present at top conferences, it gives extra kudos to that particular country, and it's also quite important. And obviously, on a risk side, if a country doesn't do any research, obviously, this could affect future development.
Definitely. And in our paper, we have been looking at publications and citations to measure research productivity. But we also talk a lot about, we also talk to colleagues in Ukraine, and we know about the situation on the ground, so to speak. So if you think back to, say, 2013, before the first invasion and before Crimea and Donbass were occupied, and compare it to today, what feels most different about the environment for doing research in Ukraine?
Oh, well, 2013 is completely different from 2026, unfortunately, and a lot of things changed. First, maybe very important thing is just some locations were much more affected than others. We can think about Eastern Ukraine, we can think about Crimea, we can think about Southern Ukraine, Kherson region. Like people, worked there, worked in institutions, did some kind of analysis, some research, and they cannot do anymore. some of them had to move, and obviously, whenever a person changes location, there are some cost of this, and it might take much longer time to to do this. Also, we can think about institutions and institutional continuity. Like when institutions, university tried to build, within 5, 10, 15 years, people started moving and there were no people to help to develop further as well. There were also huge infrastructural risks. We know a number of universities in Kharkiv that were under constant bombing of Russians. These all kind of elements, now matter, and obviously they negatively affect researchers in Ukrainian universities. And final point that I would like to mention is maybe slightly more positive. Many Ukrainians started collaborating more with Western universities, and like Ukrainians started visiting Poland, United Kingdom, many other countries. There were like joint projects. There was some support for Ukrainians to come and work. And maybe in future it will give, some sort of, push for development.
Well, definitely. So there are not only the bad things that happen to Ukrainian researchers, but there are also opportunities that they can use to develop their research and research potential in the future. And you mentioned something that is very important, because one of the big fears, of course, is the brain drain, that many of the most talented people will just leave and never come back. But there's also this more optimistic idea of brain circulation when Ukrainians building careers abroad, but staying connected, co-authoring, and maybe returning later to Ukraine to help develop Ukrainian research and science overall. So from what you see, are we mostly looking at a one-way brain drain, or do you see signs of a more positive brain circulation story emerging?
Well, that's another very good point. Let's say, no matter what, Ukrainians that even leave Ukraine, they still remain Ukrainians. And I give an example of my year, KC graduation year 2001, Kiev School of Economics. Let's say maybe around 40 of us graduated. 20 of them went abroad and got PhD, started working. And nowadays, 10, 15 of them are professors in American, UK, European, Australian universities. And many of them continue working on topics related to Ukraine, continue supporting Ukraine. And there are all these kind of spin-offs, some joint projects, collaboration with Ukrainian institutions. Yes, we left Ukraine, but we still have families, extended families in Ukraine, and there are some collaborations. Another thing that Ukrainians now have unique opportunity to be exposed and better integrated into world research, international research. And let's say, Western research is extremely competitive, and Ukrainians are exposed to this shocks maybe the first time, and obviously they see standards, they see how much work is required, and they also talk with their colleagues back in Ukraine and explain them, look, if you would like to be successful, you have to follow these standards. So yes, like first story related to brain drain, that's true. But look, when Soviet Union collapsed, there was a good school of maybe mathematics, physics. I'm not familiar, but I suspect those disciplines were traditionally strong. Many scientists left, but at the same time, there was kind of some collaboration here and there. And the same I would expect for any other disciplines.
I'm also optimistic here. So I think that, supporting young researchers or just staying connected to Ukrainian colleagues, it helps a lot and just establishes a benchmark that can be very helpful. But now let's look ahead a little bit. So what would need to happen in terms of policy, funding, and institutions for Ukrainian science to not only survive the war, but actually come out of it stronger and more integrated into the global research community?
The point of integration is extremely important. For a long period of time, Ukrainian science was not integrated into West, and there were even values were different. It was enough to publish 20 papers in a local outlet, to get promoted to professor. And this huge pressure for publications, also lack of autonomy, problems with funding, pushed Ukrainian science away from West. And there is need for a change in Ukrainian science. And there are number of things that I would recommend. I guess for this we can even follow closely Polish experience, the way how things developed. 20 years ago, well, Poland in terms of structure has quite similar. There is an Academy of Science, which well-established institutions. There are traditional universities with own hierarchy. But step by step, they started introducing new criteria, inviting Western experts for evaluation of funding, evaluation of promotion, and so on. There are incentives, Polish researchers are encouraged to apply for grants, and typically evaluation panels consist of non-Polish residents, those who stay in other universities, in Western universities, like I was helping with a number of them. So obviously, these 2 points, maybe longer term funding and external evaluation, so that only proper research, is funded. These are very important things. And of course, we have to encourage different collaborations. Collaborations, it can be through European grants, when Ukrainian university is part of bigger consortium like France, UK, Ukraine, Italy. And then when Ukrainians work in a team with others, they learn not only how to do research, but how to publish. And obviously, there should be incentives for support for maybe Western-trained Ukrainians who are happy to come back to Ukraine and contribute to development.
Definitely. But now I would like to turn on your other hat as an editor of Economic Modeling, which is one of the leading journals in economics. And many of our listeners are researchers themselves in Ukraine and elsewhere, trying to publish in international journals. So for many of them, the editorial process feels a bit mysterious, maybe. So when you open a new submission to Economic Modeling, what are the first things you look for that tell you, this paper has a real contribution, it's worth my time?
Oh, well, economic modeling, that's my main challenge now, because given the amount of papers that we get, let's say we have to, spend a lot of time on processing and making fair decisions. If you think about quality of any product that we have, there are a number of attributes that we are looking for. And in terms of research, research that is publishable in highly ranked journals, obviously contribution is the key point, contribution to literature. But we can rephrase, it's not contribution per se. That's what we know new that we didn't know before in a particular area. That's what contribution. It's not enough to say we contribute to emerging literature of, let's say, labor markets in Ukraine. No. We have to show what we found and why it's important, how we extend knowledge. Obviously, another important element is related to credibility of analysis. Credibility of analysis, we can think about identification, whether we talk about just simple correlation or maybe there is an attempt to establish causality, fancy attempt. Also, we have to see whether authors are clear about their data and the way how they approached solving research question. And final point, in business they call it marketing, but in journal publications we can call it writing, clarity of writing, logic. It's not about writing in correct English. It's about easiness to read. So it's important that your abstract, your introduction clearly communicates what the paper is about. So coming back, contribution, let's say, approach, methodology, as well as writing. These are three major points.
And a lot of people working with Ukrainian data worry that editors will see Ukraine as just another country and not exciting enough on its own. And this is especially true given that many top economic journals are very much US-centric. So how can work using data from Ukraine still make a genuine contribution that an international audience cares about? And what makes Ukraine more than just a geographic label in the title?
There are a number of suggestions that I would give to people who work with Ukrainian data. First and most important thing, you are not selling Ukraine as sort of case study for this question. Think about our world. If we have 200 countries, we cannot have 200 papers. Like just replacing, like the same approach in other country. We have to think about knowledge, existing knowledge, and how we extend it. That's what I mentioned before as contribution. And maybe in certain circumstances, Ukraine can provide you unique setup to explore certain relationships. And typical kind of paragraph in introduction why Ukraine is particularly good, for this particular research, that would be perfect. Also, we have to think how findings can be generalized to like other countries, whether this particular piece of research has certain external validity. And of course, we have to think about, again, the way how analysis is implemented, attempts to establish causality. And let's say you shouldn't focus on Ukraine as key contribution factor. Ukraine should be ideal environment to explore that particular question.
Well said, well said. So now to the painful part. Rejections, and especially desk rejections, when the paper doesn't even go to the referees. So as an editor, what are the most common reasons for desk rejection? What are the typical signals that a paper is not a good fit for the journal or just not ready yet for the peer review?
Well, I feel authors' pain sometimes, and I don't want to reject papers. However, sometimes we have to do these difficult decisions. And when I ask you what makes paper good, and I mention contribution, right, methodology, or kind of establishing causality, identification, and writing. If any of these three elements is not good, and picked up at the point of kind of screening of non-specialists, it's likely to be the desk reject. We have to think, if an economist who reads your paper likes your idea as a kind of general interest reader, whether there is an interesting element, data approach, setup that can attract attention, whether writing is clear, like kind of thing. We all are reading books, if not books, like journal articles. Sometimes we read first paragraph and we don't want to read anymore. But sometimes we want first paragraph and say, so what's next? And that's what you want to achieve in your book. And obviously, there are a number of ethics issues, double submission. Sometimes authors get rejected and again submit without asking permission of editor. Also, there is big issue nowadays that people start using LLM, ChatGPT, and to some extent, it's our new world. And we understand that a lot of support will be provided by AI in our future. But we have to still keep in mind a kind of human element. We don't want to get to the point when AI writes papers, AI evaluates papers, and we have to spend time, serious time, on creating this knowledge. AI can help, but still, main decision has to be done by humans. And we can pick up, when there are a set of sentences that are not really related, that's definitely AI, and it could flag that particular submission.
Definitely, AI is just a tool that we should learn to use. But again, we need to make our own decisions and guide the AI to help us. And once a paper survives the desk screening, it goes into the peer review, which for many authors is a black box. So could you briefly walk us through what happens inside the peer review process from the editor's perspective? How do you select referees, or what do you expect from them, and how do you make the reports, how do you use their reports to make your own decision?
Well, in terms of the process, every journal is different. I can talk about economic modeling because I am involved. And in economic modeling, we have certain tiers of screening. First paper gets to editors who overview paper and check whether general quality, whether it's interesting question, whether it's not too specific. So it's that first desk rejection decision. Then, if everything okay, we send it to associate editors who have deeper knowledge of specific field. And they look through the paper. They can also now recommend desk rejection, or they think it's potentially interested. They send to the third tier, to reviewers. So then reviewers get reviewers. How do we find reviewers? We take a look on where paper were published, what are the names of authors that write on a similar topic. Also, economic model is Elsevier journal, and we have access to databases, recommendations by Scopus that these 10, 15, 20 guys could be potentially good referees for this paper. We approach them. We are happy if they accept. Maybe if they accept, they do reports. Later, they become associate editors. So that's part of process. So then, coming to the third tier, reviewers, we can get 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4 reports with recommendations. So these recommendations come back to associate editor who makes her recommendations, and then everything is coming to editor who makes final decision. So this quite stable institutional setup where we have multiple tiers, but at the same time there is stability in system. For editor, it's very difficult to reject paper if reviewers and associate editors strongly recommends revision. At the same time, there are topics that the editor believes are very good, like an editor can make, like marginal decisions, but not kind of overturning itself. So that's the way how economic modeling works. So decisions are based on recommendations of several tiers of reviewing, and then final decision is made.
And if authors are lucky and they get an invitation to resubmit, what advice would you give them to how to respond to reviewers' comment in the best way?
Okay, well, that's I have let's say my experience in the role as editor, the role as reviewer, and obviously as author, and I understand how it's difficult to let's say play each role of each of these roles within this system. If we get a report, we have to first of all, like sit and think what can be done, and we have to start addressing each point in a polite way. If there are things that we cannot do, we have to make an attempt to do it. Like, okay, we cannot do like you suggested, but we can make an attempt doing it in this or that way. We also have to prioritize major issues, and typically back to what makes paper good, contribution identification. These two things you can find almost in every referee report. Think what else should be done to convince your causality. If there are things that you disagree, you might say it, but in a polite way. In a polite way, explain calmly, like try to add extra analysis to support your arguments. And do not ignore stuff. Do not defend yourself. So that would be my suggestion. Do your best to address in the most polite way.
Definitely. And now to close, I want to bring this back to Ukraine and to the people who might be listening from Kyiv, Lviv, or Kharkiv, or maybe from abroad. If you could speak directly to young Ukrainian researchers in Ukraine or abroad, what would be your one or two key pieces of advice as a journal editor?
Okay. One a long time ago, I attended, I think it was European Economic Association, and there was at the time, like prominent researcher. Later, he became a Nobel Prize winner, and she was asked how to be successful, how to publish. Answer was, you have to present at US universities, to give seminars there. And that was in front of audience, full of young Europeans, who hardly ever traveled to US, Now, if you think about this advice, what does it mean? What can we do having limited access to resources, having limited access to kind of science? First of all, try to be in the field, to focus on what's happening new in your area. That's crucial. Try to attend as many online events as possible, see people talking about. For instance, NBR Summer Institute, it's available online. Just go watch it, check what people are doing, how they present, what they are presenting, how they develop their identification strategy. Try to attend these events. Try to choose 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20 journals and follow them. You can choose economic modeling. Every economic modeling empirical paper now has a replication package. Check that replication package, check the way how analysis is implemented, whether you can learn something from that analysis. And also try to present. You don't necessarily need to go to US to give seminars. You can give seminar like in another university, but given seminar gives you understanding what your paper is about. When you structure your presentation, when you structure your in kind of motivation of your research, that's de facto your introduction. How you convince whether your story is interesting. You convince yourself, you convince closest people to you, you convince wider audience. So yes, try to follow main papers in area, attending seminars, and also present yourself.
These are great advice. Thank you, Sasha. And thank you so much both for your work on understanding how war affects Ukrainian science and for your very concrete advice to researchers trying to publish in difficult circumstances. And for listeners, we'll put a link in the description to our paper that we discussed and also to information about economic modeling and its submission guidelines. Sasha, thanks again for joining me.
Thank you very much. It was great to have a chat.
Thanks for listening and see you next time.
This has been Policy Implications. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and stay tuned for more conversations on Ukraine's economy, institutions, and the challenges of reconstruction. I also encourage you to donate to support Ukraine. You'll find information on trusted ways to do so in the episode description.